the book. The book is a comprehensive look at the fundamental rights and needs of children when it comes to marriage and family. And it is a unflinching takedown of all the forms of families that violates the rights of children. It is my best attempt to collate the highest level of scholarship and the most cutting testimonies of children who have grown up in these forms of modern family, so that you walk away understanding unequivocally that marriage is a matter of justice for children, and we can never, ever compromise, neither as conservatives nor as Christians, on that fundamental definition, because when we do, we always make child victims, and that is an injustice. So how did I get into this? 10 years ago, I guess 11 years ago now, I wasn't doing any of this. Like, we had just got to our church in Seattle. We had just gotten home from China with our youngest child, who's adopted from China. And I was just a stay-at-home mom and really involved in church. And it was when Obama evolved on the topic of gay marriage, right? That suddenly, to me, I felt like there was sort of a sea change in media, where now that the president was on board with the gay marriage agenda, the media at large were free to call everybody who opposed gay marriage bigots, haters, and homophobes. And I am generally non-confrontational, like on the truth teller, grace giver spectrum. I'm on the grace giver side. Like, I like to keep the peace. I don't like to lose my friends. And so I was really quiet for a long time about all of that. But it was when I saw that no level of so I tried to engage some friends on Facebook and say, listen, I'm not a bigot. I support traditional marriage because kids need moms and dads, right? And I thought we can have this honest conversation, right? Because people will understand. But like every single one of you guys out there who have also tried to have that conversation, very quickly you saw that there was no way to not be a bigot unless you agreed with the ever-moving progressive goalposts on family redefinition. It did not matter that you used secular reasoning. It did not matter that you personally loved gay people. It didn't matter that maybe you yourself were gay or had same-sex attraction, but believed that this is a fundamental building block of society. It didn't matter. That, to me, was the first time that the left used the tool of emotional manipulation, right? To demonize your character if you refuse to comply with their political goals. So I am very nice, but I don't like to be manipulated. So that was straw number one on the camel's back. Straw number two was the tactic that supporters of gay marriage were using to promote the idea that gay marriage was just fine. And that was saying that kids don't care if they have two moms or two dads. And that is a problem, because what you're saying when you say kids don't care if they have two moms or two dads is kids don't care if they have lost their mom or dad. Now, have you ever met a kid? Have you ever been a kid? Have you ever met a kid who was growing up without their dad? And did they not care? They cared. Right. And I had been working with youth. My husband and I were in youth ministry for a couple decades. I'm still running the youth ministry at church. I have yet to meet a kid whose father abandoned them, or whose mother left them because she was addicted to drugs, or whose parents divorced and dad moved out of state, who didn't care. And generally, at the late night lock-in, like when everybody's asleep on the gym floor and that one kid wants to stay up and talk at 3 a.m., what are they talking about? About how they are gutted, how they feel rejected, how they wonder if it was their fault that their parents got divorced, because their parents seemed to have a happy marriage until suddenly they decided that mom was going to move out. And the only reason that they can possibly put their finger on why the marriage might have dissolved is them. They must be the problem. So to me, it incensed me that the other side was using very often the deepest pain that children experience in life as a political tool. And that was enough. That was the straw. That was the second straw that broke the camel's back. So I started writing on an anonymous blog because I know these people are crazy and I know what they will do to you if you dare to challenge their political priors. Yeah. I started writing on an anonymous blog about why kids need moms and dads. And after a couple of years, after I built up a bit of a following, I was outed by an aggressive gay blogger who searched a picture and found my IP address and connected it to my husband's church, and then doxed the members of my church, right? He published the names and addresses of a lot of the people in my church on his blog as an attempt to silence me and to get me to stop writing. So that was awful, because as a non-confrontationalist, I hated that other people were suffering because of what I was writing. But the good men at the helm of my church said, oh no, that guy doesn't dictate what you say and do. And he does not change what this church believes. So you just keep going. And I did. And it was very much a what the enemy means for evil, God will use for good kind of situation. Because now that I was writing under my own name, I could submit amicus briefs to the Supreme Court. And I could lobby on behalf of children with the members of parliament in Australia. And I could speak directly to Taiwanese legislators. And I can run workshops at the United Nations. And I can found a nonprofit that defends children's rights to their mother and father, and write a book that has now been translated into 5 languages. And, you know, we're working on a video curriculum for churches, and we're going to have a documentary that is translated into as many languages as possible. So there has been pain involved in this process, but kids are worth it. Yeah. Kids are worth taking a little bit of heat for, because right now, when it comes to marriage and family, nobody's defending their rights.
Yeah. You know, I think it's interesting, isn't it, that some of Jesus' most severe warnings were to those who would bring harm to children. Mm-hmm. And so thank you for taking up the mantle, so to speak, and being a voice for those who are so often don't have that voice. So we deeply appreciate that. So thank you for sharing that. It's interesting. And again, for those of you, if you haven't read the book, Katie gives a little bit more of the details about that part of the journey in the introduction to the book, and it's pretty interesting to read. What kind of backlash did you get when the book was published, either from friends or from enemies? What kind of criticisms did you face and endure?
Well, I lost most of my intolerant friends when I first started speaking up about this. So like things had already been winnowed by the time I got to the book, but it still hurts. You know, it still hurts when somebody reads the book or reads something that I write on my public Facebook page or whatever, and they say, how can you be such an intolerant bigot? And because my natural default is to make peace. But you know, I love what Martin Luther said, you know, peace whenever possible, truth at all costs. Yeah. Like, we don't sacrifice truth for the sake of unity, right? Sure. Unity is beautiful, but unity is not God. God is God, and his truth is unchanging. And, you know, I love what you said, David, about how there are very serious admonitions against causing little ones to stumble in the New Testament. In the Old Testament, we've got close to 40 verses outlining God's specific design and protection for the fatherless, because they are vulnerable. Children who don't have their father in their life and now their mother in their life. So motherlessness in the Old Testament, very, very rare. Kids die without their moms. We've had fatherless kids forever, right? And they are vulnerable and they are easily victimized. And so God has all of these special laws to make sure that his people specifically care for the fatherless. What happens when we compromise on God's design for sex and marriage is 100% of the time incentivizing, endorsing, and promoting fatherlessness and motherlessness. And so I actually have a lot of patience for my friends that question what I'm doing and don't understand why I'm writing this book, or have who challenge me about my position on marriage or reproductive technologies, which steps on a lot of toes, even of Christians and conservatives. I've got a lot of patience for them. I don't have any patience for Christian leaders who get this wrong. I don't have any patience for pastors or leaders or teachers or people that have been steeped in scripture who compromise on God's design for sex and marriage. They are victimizing children. They are violating one of the four main demographics in the Old Testament that God set up special protections for. They are spineless. And I say, woe to you. Don't ever do it. Do not follow the world when it comes to how they think God should prescribe how we use our bodies when it comes to sex and marriage. Because either we will uphold what God says in his word, or we will force kids to pay the price for adult desires. And now you're touching the apple of God's eye, and you are in millstone around your neck territory. I don't even know if I answered your question. You can go on that business, and I just keep going.
No, you did, and I appreciate that, and I applaud your answer. So, on a more positive note, how would you say your book has been received, or what can you share with us as far as how your book's been received by what we would call conservative or Orthodox, or maybe evangelical Christianity in general? Do you have any sense about that?
It's been very positive. I am actually overwhelmed by the influence that them before us has been able to have on influencers, big thinkers, people that are a lot smarter than me, people that write a lot better than me, people with much larger platforms than me. Very often the response is, this is exactly the way we need to think and talk about this issue. Why? Because for a long time, we used to talk and have talked about why marriage is an institution given to us by God. That's true. And then when we looked at marriage redefinition, we talked about how this was really going to make it hard for Christians. That's also true. Both of those fail when it comes to the court of public opinion. Neither of those tactics for talking about and defending marriage makes any cultural headway. And so we continually lose all of these marriage and family battles because it makes it sound like this is really just a Christian thing. And the redefinition of marriage is really going to just harm Christians. When the reality is marriage is a human thing, and the redefinition of marriage always harms children. We have to learn to talk about marriage and all other family issues: divorce, same-sex marriage, polygamy, cohabitation, sperm donation, egg donation, surrogacy, and even adoption. We need to talk about all of these issues as matters of justice for children, because when we get these questions wrong, when we come to the wrong conclusions about them, children are victimized. And so we cannot victimize children, right? Neither as Christians, nor as conservatives, nor as a nation that simply wants to thrive. You will not thrive if you are routinely in law, culture, and technology victimizing the next generation. So I think that the book has been helpful for conservatives, for Christians, just for people that have been uneasy about the direction that our culture is taking in terms of modern family, in terms of articulating exactly why. A lot of people say, I knew that there was something that I didn't feel good about related to the redefinition of marriage. I knew I didn't feel good about surrogacy, but I couldn't figure out why. This is the template. Children have a right to their mother and father that you can lay over the top of any cultural, legal, or technological innovation and come out with the proper conclusion. And the proper conclusion is, if it insists that children sacrifice their fundamental right to be known and loved by their mother and father so adults can live as they please, the answer is no. And that is challenging because historically, the way that we have addressed marriage makes it sound like it's the gays. The gays need to change. It's the gays that are the problem. But when we take this child-centric template of children have a right to their mother and father, what it tells you is all adults, single, married, gay, straight, fertile, and infertile, must do hard things so the rights of children are protected. In this world of children's rights, nobody gets a pass. Nobody gets a pass. Every adult at some point in our life is going to have to answer the question, am I going to do the hard thing, or am I going to make the kid do the hard thing? Here's a few examples. the young heterosexual couple who finds themselves with an unplanned pregnancy. What are you going to do? You can either force the child to do the hard thing by taking their life through abortion. You can either make the child do the hard thing by growing up with the single mom. Maybe she's the only one that's willing to commit herself to the child. Or both adults can do the hard thing by reorienting their life around a child's right to life and right to their mother and father. That's hard. That's really hard. But the only alternative is for the child to do hard things. What about the couple in the struggling marriage? And let me just say, in my off duty, when I'm not advocating on behalf of children's rights around the globe, I'm a pastor's wife. We counsel all of the people in struggling marriages, the very, very real burdens of trying to make it till death do you part when you're dealing with porn addictions, job loss, childhood issues that are emerging in the middle of your marriage, parenting challenges. Like the kind of things that you struggle with in married life are very hard. But if the adults fail to do the hard work of mending their marriage and working it out, you simply are going to force children to do the hard thing by living in two different homes and having split lives. Who's going to do the hard thing? The adults or the kids? If you're one of the people who struggles with same-sex attraction and desperately wants to be a father or desperately wants to be a mother and probably would be a great father or great mother, are you going to create a family that honors the rights of your children to be known and loved by their mother and father every single day in a married relationship? Or are you going to force the child to sacrifice a relationship with their mother or father so that you can create a home that centers around your romantic attractions? Someone's going to do the hard thing. Is it going to be the adult or is it going to be the child? Or you're an adult that struggles with infertility, crushing, heartbreaking. And if you have experienced it, you know exactly what I'm talking about, especially the ladies out there. You are probably feeling like Rachel did, who said, give me children or I will die, right? You want babies and you would do anything for them. But if the solution to infertility is using a sperm donor or an egg donor because you desperately want a biological connection to a child, what you're doing is you're just handing your loss off to the kid. You're longing for a biological connection in service of their severance of a biological connection. You get the baby you want. They will grow up wondering, who is my mother? Where is she? Does she know I exist? Is that where I got my blue eyes? Someone's going to do the hard thing. Is it going to be the adult or is it going to be the child? So this template of children's right to their mother and father is the correct way to look at all marriage and family issues: the definition of marriage, cohabitation, polygamy, divorce, same-sex parenting, sperm donation, egg donation, surrogacy, adoption. Every single thing comes down to, are you respecting or are you disregarding the rights of children? And at some point, all of us are going to have to choose. And all of us need to choose the kids.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah, it occurs to me as you're speaking, it occurs to me that, we are to love our neighbors as ourselves. And there is no neighbor nearer to us than our children. And if we're going to love our children as ourselves, and we need to put their interests ahead of our own desires and priorities. And you've spoken to that very eloquently, and I appreciate that. We live in a day and age where everyone likes to talk about their rights. What would you say to those who are a little put off by the concept of a children's rights movement? I mean, after all, on your book, you do say why we need a global children's rights movement. And when you talk about children's rights, what specifically are you talking about?
Yeah, I get some pushback from conservatives on this topic, right? Because the term children's rights has been so co-opted and adulterated by the left. When you hear the term children's rights, or if you Google the term children's rights, very likely what you are going to find is children have a right to sexual pleasure. And that's being promoted by even some United Nations organizations globally. Or children have a right to cross-sex hormones if they identify as transgender. Or children have a right to have their sexual identity concealed from their parents at school, right? That's typically how we've heard the term children's rights used. Now, the good news is that's not children's rights, right? We make the case in the book about children's natural rights based on natural law. Natural law, universally understood philosophy of understanding a moral code based on our natural design. There is no child right to access cross-sex hormones, right? In fact, there's no child right to keeping a transgender identity hidden from your parents. As a matter of fact, there is a parental rights that says we, the parents, are responsible for a child's upbringing, including their medical care and their education. So get the hell away from my child. That's the answer to that one, right? But children do have a natural right to be known and loved by their mother and father. I'll give you a brief explanation of why this is a genuine natural right. But if you have more questions about this, I did a video with the Colson Center on their platform, What Would You Say?, called Do Children's Rights Conflict with Parental Rights?, where I go into more detail about this. But here's the answer. Now, I'm not a natural lawyer. Robert George wrote the foreword for my book, which, let me just say, is worth the price of the book. Just the foreword, worth the price of the book. Robert George, brilliant guy, scholar on natural law, right? I don't think like Robert George. Stacy and I, the authors of the book, we are moms, right? So I will tell you the formula that we use to evaluate whether or not something is a natural right. Because these days, everything's a right. I don't know if you've noticed, but everything adults really, 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 really want is a right, right? I have a right to free education. I have a right to housing. I have a right to government-funded birth control. I have a right to choose to kill my child if I want to kill my child. So people are misusing the term rights all over the place. So there's a lot of confusion. So we used what we call the 3 rules that make it a right test to figure out, is this really a natural right? Based on sort of this rubric of what constitutes a natural right. So here's the 3 things. Number 1, a natural right exists pre-government, right? It's not something that the government gives you. It's not something that emerges on the scene just because there's a government to hand it over to you. So things like your right to life existed pre-government. Your relationship to your mother and father also existed before the government, right? A natural right is not given by government. It is supposed to be protected by the government. Number 2, nobody has to provide it for you, right? If you have to lay a foundation for it, sheetrock it, paint it, and roof it, it's not a natural right. It's a commodity. It's a commodity that you probably need to survive, but it's not a natural right. You have a natural right to pursue shelter, food, healthcare, housing, all of that. But if somebody has to provide it for you, it's not a natural right. If you're alive, you have your right to life. You are alive, right? Nobody has to give you your life. If you're alive, if you're a person, you have life. If you are alive, your parents also exist. Nobody has to provide it for you, okay? 3rd, a natural right is distributed equally. If it can vary in kind or degree, it's not a natural right. So dorm room versus penthouse. GED versus PhD. If it can vary in its distribution, it's not a natural right. Natural rights are something that everybody has in the same amount, the same ability to defend yourself, the same ability to speak. How many lives do you have? You get 1, so do I. How many parents do you have? You have 2, so do I. So we use this 3 rules that make it a right test to sort of filter out a lot of the rights talk that's taking place, generally on the left, but sometimes misused on the right as well. And when you're looking at children's natural rights, they 100% have a natural right to life and right to their mother and father. They do not have a right to access pornographic materials in the name of like a librarian's freedom or whatever that is, right? So we need to understand and redeem the term children's rights, because this is the way that we need to move forward when we talk about marriage and family issues. Because when you're talking about rights, you're talking about justice. And that's exactly what this is about. This is about justice for children.
Yeah. Amen. You know, it was interesting just this morning as I was catching up on a little bit of local and national news. out of South Dakota. I believe the state representative is a South Dakota state representative. The representative's name is Erin Healy. Here's what she had to say. I'm just going to read the quote. She tweeted this out. Extremist group Family Heritage Alliance. So right away, her take on it. They're an extremist group, right? So watch out for them. Extremist group Family Heritage Alliance said this morning that the safest place for kids are in families that have a married mom and dad. What a dangerous and un-American belief. That's what that state representative from South Dakota tweeted out earlier this week. It's a dangerous and un-American belief. That to me is just mind-boggling that anybody would say that. But I'm bringing that up to lead into this question. There's a lot of documentation in your book in support of your conclusions. And that's one of the things I appreciate about your book, the research behind it. But do you find that people are generally persuaded by the research and documentation? And if not, why do you think that is?
Well, the people that are blinded by ideology are not, which that representative obviously is. And kudos to her for actually keeping the tweet up, because girl got taken to the woodshed when it came to when Brad Wilcox, which in my opinion is like the pinnacle of social science research on family structure, when he is laying down the government issued data to refute exactly what you're saying, it's time to take the loss and just delete that tweet. But she didn't. So I'm like, okay. And yeah, I'm like, well, you stepped in it, girl. You brought a toothpick to a gun fight. And the reality is that when it comes to family structure, and if you're talking about data and research, we've got bazookas, right? That is what we've got. The evidence for married biological parents raising their children together is even agreed upon by institutions that are more left-leaning, right? Even more left-leaning institutions like Child Trends will say children fare best when they're raised in the home of their married biological parents in a low conflict relationship. And so we shouldn't be surprised by this. It is self-evident. It is common, or not as common sense, right? It aligns with biology. It is something on which the 5 major religions of the world agree on. It has really only been disputed historically in about the last 5 minutes. And so all of these people, the only thing they really have to go on is ideology. That's the only thing that's on their side. And a few anecdotes, right? That's what they've got. When you are going to filter this through the lens of natural law, it doesn't compute. When you're going to run the numbers that we have based on the decades of family structure, it doesn't hold up. When you're going to look at the honest stories of kids who have lived through these modern families, they're going to slap you down. So it's like these people have got to live in an ideological bubble to continue to believe that being raised with a married mother and father is bad for you, dangerous, or un-American. Unfortunately, increasingly, that's where a lot of people on the left have decided to make a home.
Yeah, so if you're not persuaded by facts and research, then where are you going to go, right? You're going to head, I guess, to the safety of your ideology and ignore everything else.
Well, and let me jump in there and say, we have always had the best data. Like, we have always had the best research. We have always had common sense. We have always had natural law. We have always had statistics. We've been studying family structure for a long time. We have always known that alternative family structures, even before we had same-sex parenting and surrogate-born children, we've always known that children are at increased risk when they are being raised by an unrelated adult. That's the very reason why adoptive parents like me and like many of you out there had to undergo vetting and screening and background checks, because it's actually risky to raise kids with adults who are unrelated to them. And we go into scalding and horrifying data about that in chapter 2. But what we have not had, what our side has not had, are the stories. And that is why the other side has won for so long, because they have been able to humanize their victims, right? And their victims are the adults that have certain sexual feelings, longings, or identities, right? They have framed those adults as the victims. And we've responded with statistics. And that does not move hearts. So that is one thing that we do at Them Before Us is we catalog the stories of children who were raised in modern families. And especially when it comes to kids with LGBT parents, right on the homepage of our website, there's no other place that I know on the web where you're going to find the stories of kids who were raised by two moms or two dads, or had a gay mom or a gay dad or a lesbian mom. Or this is the place to look in their face and say, how'd that go for you? Did love make your family? And the reality is loss made their family. But you don't know that unless you actually read the stories of kids. So we put about 120 of them in the book so that you can look them in the face and say, if the adults are happy, the kids are happy, right, kids? And you read their stories and you go, no,
not so much.
Kids are happy when adults do hard things on their behalf so they can grow up known and loved by their mom and dad in the stability of a married home.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing though, isn't it? God says, this is the way I designed things. This is the way things work best. This is for your good and for your flourishing. And lo and behold, the statistics actually back that up. Surprise, surprise, right?
It's as if the word of God and the world of God have the same author.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. So let me come back to this issue of surrogacy for a minute or two here. It's becoming more and more of an issue, I think. Would you talk to us a little bit about the ethical issues involved and the negative impact on children who are brought into the world and into, obviously, many times alternate family structures, quote unquote, alternate family structures via surrogacy?
Yeah. And thankfully, the World Magazine article was just published. And that is my very targeted attempt to convince Christians specifically that the answer is no, 100% of the time to surrogacy. And I know that's a hard pill for a lot of you to swallow because you love babies and I also love babies. We all love babies. And in our mind, a lot of times we think, well, surrogacy is just about giving babies to adults who can't have them. That is not what surrogacy is. Surrogacy is about on-demand designer babies shipped worldwide. That is what surrogacy is. Surrogacy is the commodification of children, and it has to be opposed in 100% of cases. So the best and easiest way to understand surrogacy is surrogacy takes what God designed and what natural law says should be one woman, mother, and breaks them up into 3 purchasable and optional women. Okay. So the first mother is the genetic mother, the woman whose egg, the genetic material that is used to create 50% of the child. And oftentimes, infertile women maybe, but very often gay men or single men, they don't have an egg to provide. So they go to an egg catalog and they purchase an egg on a catalog. And if you're at home and you've got your cell phone and you're not really paying attention, I see you, get your phone out, Google egg donor catalog. And what you're going to see is an Amazon style search return where you can filter out the genetic material for your child based on hair color, education level, how many vials or eggs that you want to purchase, the geographic area, by race. You can custom order your kid. You can do it with sperm donors too. Go to sperm donor catalog, right? We are purchasing and designing children through third-party reproductions, through sperm and egg donation. And I say donation because this isn't a benevolent nonprofit. Everybody's buying and everyone is selling. And very often these children who are created through third-party reproduction, about half of them say, it bothers me that money changed hands over my conception. They feel like a designer product because they are a designer product. So mother number 1 is the genetic mother who contributes the egg. Mother number 2 is the birth mother, the woman that bonds with the baby for the first 9.5 months. Now, I wasn't like a super pregnant mom who was enthralled with my children before I met them. Generally, there were 5 different things I could complain about when I was pregnant, right? Wasn't like a sweet pregnant lady. But once that baby was in my arms, I was like, I will cut you.
Mama bear, right?
Mama bear, right? Immediately, mama bear. The baby And I had that, even though I've got hundreds of other relationships. I had this fierce protectiveness of my child. This is mine, get away. The baby has one relationship with the mom. That is it. And do you think that that baby does not care if then they lose that relationship with that one woman and are handed off to what is these days increasingly just men who place the baby on their shirtless chest and are like, bond with me, I'm your mom now. No, children need that bond and that connection with their birth mother. And if any of you guys have worked at pregnancy resource centers, what do you tell the women in crisis pregnancies? You say, you're not going to be a mother, you are a mother. That baby already knows you, they already love you, they already want you. You are the person in their life. They're gonna need you. Love that baby now because they're bonding with you. Start bonding with them. We already know that even though adoptees are adopted generally by parents who are more wealthy, more educated, and statistically even spend more time with their kids than the average biological parent, adoptees tend to struggle more with anxiety, depression, substance abuse. Many of them would say it is because of this primal wound of being cut off from my mother on the day that I was born. It hindered my ability to trust and attach and form healthy relationships. Sometimes in adoption, we're not able to keep the child with the birth mother. Surrogacy inflicts that primal wound intentionally and commercially in 100% of cases. So in surrogacy, the child always loses their birth mother and sometimes loses their genetic mother. The third mother is the social mother, the woman who provides the daily female love and care that children crave. Not only does it maximize child development because women parent differently than men parent, and those differences are complementary, but children long to be loved by a woman and they long to be loved by a man. And so in our book, you're going to read about 25 stories of kids who grew up without either their mother or their father. And they describe what we call father hunger or mother hunger. They hunger for the love of a mother. I'm actually like, because I do this work, people will send me like screenshots of chat groups of like gay men raising kids, right? Because there's now entire communities of men who have made motherless children intentionally. And they'll say, oh my gosh, my 4-year-old like walked up to their teacher today and said, will you be my mommy? And then she just started walking over to everybody else. Will you be my mommy? Will you? Where are they getting this from? Like nobody in their world is telling them they should have a mom. They've got dada and they've got papa. And everybody is saying, you're so lucky to have dada and papa. You don't need a mom. And yet even these 4-year-olds are asking every woman that they are around, will you be my mommy? Why? Because this is the nature of being a human child. You long to be loved by a man and you long to be loved by a woman. And surrogacy is, for the first time in our species' existence, enabling us to create intentionally motherless children. So that's what surrogacy does. It says, here's these 3 moms. Which one do you want? Which one do you already have? Which one do you need? You can purchase this one. You can rent this one. This one, kind of optional anyway, right? I mean, gender is a social construct, don't you know? Kids don't need moms and dads. They just need to be safe and loved, right? And so now you've got these situations where oftentimes kids lose all 3. They'll never know their anonymous donor mother. They're cut off from the birth mother they bonded with, and they'll be starved of maternal love all their life, every single day. But even in the situations where you've got a sweet, infertile, heterosexual couple that wants to have a baby, and they say, well, we can contribute the egg and we'll take the baby home to have a mother every day. We just need someone else's womb. What they're saying is, look, kid, you're going to sacrifice the bond that you have with the only woman that you know because we want a baby.
Yeah.
Wanting a baby is very good. Insisting that children sacrifice because you want something is an injustice.
It's not a good thing. So, yeah, in fact, I think in many respects, surrogacy seems to me to be the ultimate commodification of children. It just so blatantly treats a child as a commodity to be purchased. It's just, and by the way, I want to mention the stories in your book. For those who haven't read the book, I will tell you the stories are they are compelling, and in some cases they're hard to read. It's just, they're heartbreaking. And but we need to hear those stories because they're out there and they're telling the truth about the impact of either fatherlessness or motherlessness in a child's life. So we're going to get to some questions here shortly. But Katie, what are some practical suggestions you might have for pastors and churches to address the issues raised in your book?
Well, for pastors and for everybody, I feel like step number one is you have to become an expert. I think a lot of us are like, well, you know what God says, but the truth is that God does not necessarily tell us whether or not IVF is okay, or surrogacy. It's in the Bible, right? So is polygamy. It's in the Bible. You need some really good answers for your people because they've got questions. A lot of times they're facing challenging marriages, infertility, same-sex attraction. I mean, you're shepherding people through all of the major adult struggles, and they are struggles. They are real struggles. I'm never going to minimize that. As a pastor, the solution can never be a kid is going to sacrifice so you can escape your struggles. We just can't do that. But very, very often it's helpful to understand the research, to understand the true victims, which is children, because too often it is easier for us to say, yeah, I guess that you guys have really, you've tried for 5 years to work out this marriage, and yeah, you're right, maybe it's just time to start over. Well, that starting over in 50% of cases will result in those children developing a split personality.
Yeah. I
think you need to know that. I think you need to know going in that when adults refuse to do the hard thing, kids are going to pay the price. And too often, even as Christians, get sucked into the cultural narratives of if the adults are happy, the kids will be happy, and that's a lie. That's garbage. The kids are often destroyed, even if the adults are happy. And so we can't follow that playbook. You need to know that IVF, only about 7% of lab-created babies will be born alive. 93% of them are going to be destroyed, aborted, spend their entire existence in freezers, donated to research. By the numbers, IVF takes more embryonic life than the abortion industry every year. I mean, you guys need to know this because the world is not going to give them the right answers. And you need to give them the right answers. Scripture absolutely gives us the sideboards for understanding marriage, sexuality, right, wrong. But there's an awful lot that's going on in culture right now that I think you need to be an expert on. And then you'll be able to see how God's word feeds in and supports and buttresses this. But the research is never going to go against God's revelation, right? It's always going to support God's revelation. And sometimes the research even will give us, even people like us, like I carry the Bible around with me everywhere, right? I'm like nutty about it, right? But even I am buttressed by the research. Sometimes that is the confidence that I need to be able to speak with the authority on which you need to speak on some of these matters. So I really would say, get the book. There also is an incredible program being put out by the Legacy Institute here in Washington that is specifically for pastors. And they're going through a lot of the issues that you weren't necessarily taught in seminary, especially about marriage, sexuality, things like assisted suicide that's kind of coming on the radar. Take a look at the Legacy Institute, its resources just for pastors, courses that you can go through. And I believe they've got an entire course devoted to the material in our book.
Great. Thank you so much. Some really good recommendations there. Yeah, and I would just echo for those listening, nobody, pastors or otherwise, nobody has to do the research. The research is right here. So take advantage. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. And so that was the Legacy Institute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've got an amazing pastor platform they're developing. I don't know if it's available for the entire public yet,
okay,
but it's going to be free.
We'll do some checking on that and be sure and get that available as soon as it is available. We want to be able to link to that for listening audience as well. So, Dan, do you have some questions that have been presented? Otherwise, I have some other things we can deal with.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming, Katie. We really appreciate you coming in and talking to our supporters from around the state. One of the questions asked is from a Christian mom, and I'd even expand the question a little bit, but what can Christian moms and dads do to best support and promote these children's rights issues? She feels like a lot of her friends agree with these issues in private, but they're afraid to speak up. What would you recommend to these parents?
So same thing, like, it's very hard to speak up if you don't really know what to say. So you need to become an expert. And mainly you need to become an expert because depending on how old your kids are, you're going to feed out little bits to them, like a mother bird digests a big thing and feeds out little bits to her kids, right? You're going to do that on all kinds of tough issues. And especially the topic of marriage is one of the toughest issues that your kids are going to face. If they choose to go against the culture, they had better be able to defend themselves, right? So let me just, quick story. Our oldest is 19, right? But when she went to middle school for the first time, she went to private school all through elementary school. And then we moved her into the public school. And it's not just a public school, it's a Seattle public school. And it's not just any Seattle public school. It is a Seattle public school focused on social justice, which at the time meant gay rights, right? That was the social justice they were promoting. And so we're like, look, honey, you're going to know more about this than anyone else. We expect you to be an expert on all of the topics that socialism, abortion, transgenderism, marriage, like you are going to know more about this than anyone else. And so all that summer before she went to middle school, like every week it was a new topic. We're reading, we're discussing, blah, blah. And she just would be like, Mom. Mom, can we stop? And I'm like, no, because you're going to be the authority on this. So a couple months after she came home, 6th grade, right? 6th grade, she comes home and she goes, yeah, Ella asked me to read her persuasive essay on why gay marriage should be legal. And it's like Washington State had already made it legal at that point, right? So Ella was like 2 years behind the curve. But anyway, Ella's writing her persuasive essay on why gay marriage should be legal. And she handed it to me and said, be my peer reviewer. And my daughter just wrote, talk to me at lunch, right at the bottom. So they go to their lunch table. They've got like these 9, their lunch table of 9 little 6th graders. And Ella just goes, you don't agree with me that gay marriage should be legal? And my daughter goes, no. And she goes, that means you hate gay people. And she goes, no, my grandmother's gay and we love her. So what's your argument? So first of all, sorry, I should have mentioned this earlier. My mom's gay. She's been in a relationship with her partner since I've been like 10. So like, when it comes to loving people who are gay, like my kids are like, been there, done that since my entire life, love my grandma, move along. Like this, the charge of being homophobic or hateful or bigoted, it just like water off a duck's back. They're like, you're lying about me. Please, girl, move along. So anyway, she said, what's your argument? And her friend goes, like this in front of her 9 little friends, right? So Ella goes, well, if a man and a woman love each other and they can get married, then 2 men who love each other should be able to get married and 2 women who love each other should be able to get married. And there's no difference. And my daughter goes, 2 men don't make a baby and 2 women don't make a baby. A man and a woman make a baby. That's the difference. And Ella goes, well, if the 2 men wanted a baby, they could just adopt. And my daughter goes, adoption doesn't exist to give kids to adults. Adoption exists so that kids can find families and kids need moms and dads. And Ella goes, well, I don't think so. I think that kids just need to be safe and loved. They don't need moms and dads. And my daughter goes, are you kidding me? Men and women are different. Men teach kids certain lessons and moms teach kids other lessons and kids need both lessons. And like, she's telling me this on the way home from the bus stop, right? And one of my parenting rules is we call it the no flinch rule. No flinch, don't freak out. Just, oh, fascinating. Oh, your teacher said boys can wear dresses. Oh, well, tell me more about that. Like no flinch. We don't freak out. But inside, I'm like, yeah, Ella, yeah. What you got, Ella? You got nothing. Oh, you came against the champ, Ella. But but you got nothing, Ella, because my kid just spanked you. I mean, like, you need to know about this so your kids can know about this so they never bend. Right? And because maybe Wisconsin is different, but I think that you got challenges in Wisconsin too, right? Maybe it's not as bad as the woke Seattle public school, but your kids are going to be challenged by this. And you need to get to them early, right? You need to fill them with good information, especially before middle school, truth and beauty. And then in middle school, you got to tell them the truth about how the world is lying, especially about marriage and family, because it's going to come to them and they need to be able to stand firm.
Thank you. And then one last question for you. And so I know you've mentioned a lot of ills of how adults overtake the rights, the needs of children. But what of these ills would you say causes the most harm to children in our day and age, in our culture?
Okay, good. So legally, it is the redefinition of parenthood. Okay, so legally, the way that we used to conceive of parenthood is if you're the biological parent, you're the parent. Or if you have undergone the screening, vetting, and background checks, and you've been approved to have a child placed with you, it's adoption. It used to be just those two parameters for parenthood. But now, in the name of tolerance and equality, we are introducing a third option for parenthood, and that is intent to parent. I intend to parent this child, therefore I get the kid. And this is taking place in conjunction with reproductive technologies and the redefinition of marriage. And functionally, what it means is if you have the money to put together sperm, egg, and womb, you can walk out of the hospital with a completely unrelated child with complete parental rights. You could have purchased and designed that baby and cut them off from both biological parents. And you might be a man with a criminal history of abusing children. And it doesn't matter because you paid for the kid. And now intent to parent is the only standard for parenthood. So intent to parent functionally turns us back to Civil War era buying and selling people. That's what that does. Technologically, right now, the greatest threat is surrogacy, right? Because you can mix and match. And when you've got that womb rental, you can just do anything you want. You can selectively reduce, that is abort unwanted kids, right? Right now, we've got a massive influx of Chinese nationals who are renting the wombs of surrogates in the United States so that their child can have citizenship. I mean, it's a wild west out there. Right now, surrogacy is the greatest threat technologically, but I'll tell you what, artificial wombs are on the horizon. And then we're going to see factory floors of babies. So we need to get surrogacy straight right now because it's not going to get better. And then culturally, what's going on with the population? You know, we think, well, it's gay marriage and gay parenting, but it's cohabitation. Cohabitation by the numbers is destabilizing more children in this country than gay marriage, gay parenting, transgender parents, polygamists, all of that. It is parents who refuse to commit to one another for life and raise their children in what to date is the most secure kind of household that is wrecking children by the numbers more than any other family arrangement. So there is no substitute for marriage. There's no way that there's no redefinition of marriage that is going to give the same benefits. And there's no rejection of marriage that is going to give kids the same benefits. It is and always will be one man, one woman for one lifetime if we are serious about the well-being of kids.
Amen. Well, I think we'll wrap it up here, Katie. Thank you so much for. I'm so impressed. Not only are you a mama bear as it relates to your own children, but clearly you're a mama bear as it relates to all children, and we commend you for that. We appreciate that, and thank you again so much for being with us today. It has been delightful. It has been challenging. It has been informative, and I think it's been helpful. And so thank you so much for being with us today. And we'll look forward to hearing more from you in the future. So
really good to join you guys. Thanks so much. Enjoy the cheese out there.
Thanks so much. Have a good day, Katie. Have a good day, everybody. Thank you for joining us.